Hello and welcome to the MeG podcast once again. Been a while since we've done this. Just one of those things, and I think partly because Richard's house is being completely remodelled into some sort of new palatial establishment, I understand. Or put another way, he's only had the heating back on for a couple of days. This time of year, not so good. So he's been tied up with things like that. I think just we only do these when we think we've got something to talk about. So anyway, so here we are again for this episode. We have the usual team we've just mentioned: Richard, Jeffrey Cook, and Matt Haywood, and we've got a very special guest. This one, this is essentially the man who started this podcast in the first place, Mr. Ray Duggins.
Good evening, all.
Yeah, so welcome everybody. Thank you, Ray. Yeah, because about 3 years ago now, Ray.
Time flies, Nick. Time flies.
It does, anyway. So I think we said we'd have you back on after you had to step away, and then we've never done it. So apologies for that. But here you are. Welcome back, Ray. So we've not really got one single topic for this episode. We haven't got a thematic history and army lists thing, but we thought we'd get together, have a bit of a chat about various MeG things that hopefully will be of interest to people. We're going to sort of cover a few areas, maybe, but we'll see how time goes. A bit of a look to where we think MEG is at present, sort of where we are, what we're doing, what we're looking forward to next year, maybe in what new armies we might be planning. Thought we'd have a quick update on where 3D printing's got to. Long-time listeners of the podcast will remember a couple of years ago we had a session, which I think Matt and Graham Clacker majored in. This about 3D printing, but that moves on, and it's becoming an ever bigger thing. So a bit on that. A little bit from Richard about the 2025 Army List PDFs, but that should be quite brief. And then I thought we'd finish off with looking at some list ideas based on the one significant change to the points in the 2025 Army Builder, which could be amusing, but just see what people think on that. So, as we always say, without further ado, we'll sort of kick off with the bit of a look at where we find MEG at the present. Obviously, the four of us on this podcast are big into the competition scene, but we're not. Hopefully, won't limit ourselves to that. I must say, for this past year, I totted up earlier. I've done 17 different competitions, MEG competitions this year, and this was a year I thought I'd sort of reduce the number of competitions I did, and I think I've done about the same or potentially even more. So maybe that's maybe for me then that I'm really quite happy with MEG. The way the competition scene is going, because obviously that's my big thing. I don't have a local club or anything. I've got a significant stash of new armies waiting to be painted, at least half of them thanks to Mr. Haywood, just for being the enabler he is. So from my point of view, I'm happy, looking forward to 2025. Although, again, I'm thinking maybe 17's a lot of competitions to go to. maybe cut back a little. So, I suppose off the back of that, I suppose one question on the competition scene I'll throw out to everybody is, have we got a few too many competitions? It has been commented that for some of them, numbers have dropped a little over the last year or so.
Well, by coincidence, I also competed in 17 MEG competitions this year.
And they weren't all the same ones, were they? Because there were some where you were there and I was. So
I don't think they were all the same, that's for sure. So I've competed in 3 international events. Brussels back in January. Rouen with yourself about what, six weeks ago, something like that.
Yeah, it might be a little bit longer than that.
Maybe even longer. Yeah, and then I was kindly invited by oh, who invited me?
It was Roger Pitfield, wasn't it? 'Cause he
Roger,
went to
yes. Sorry,
Switzerland.
I had a complete blank for a moment there. Over to Geneva, which I thoroughly enjoyed and had a great time there. So yes, three abroad and 14 in the UK.
Yeah, I think only one of mine was abroad. Only the Rouen one, which is, as you say, thoroughly enjoyable. Lovely weekend.
Yeah. So I equally don't expect to do quite as many competitions in the next 12 months. But in answer to your question, do I think there are too many? I think as long as the competitions are viable, I'm not too concerned. I think it gives more opportunity for more people to be involved. So that's probably a good thing.
Ray?
I mean, obviously, just for the people who don't really know me, I mean, my focus, like Nick, as he said in his entry, my focus is on what I call tournaments, competitions, happenings, events, whatever. And I was talking, because I am a member of a club, so I was talking to my club mates, and I've also canvassed their opinions what I wanted to say on the podcast. And
oh, thanks. They're always useful.
They told me what to say. So I was thinking about I came back to Meg at Warfare 2023, and I have not played a single pickup game of Meg since then. The only games I've played have been in tournaments or practicing for tournaments. So I have a very skewed view of Meg. And I think what I want to do, firstly, which probably people will be a bit surprised by this, I want to congratulate you, the team who are responsible for the lists, of actually keeping what in 40K they call the balanced data slate. You guys keep those lists up to date, you change things and you change points. And that is incredibly important, because I think Meg is a great game. I'm not a reenactor. I'm not a historical. I don't want to do the Battle of Hastings. I quite like to do the Battle of Hastings if I had a shield and spear, but not on the table. I don't do that. But I think Meg has become a great game. And I know you put yourself in an invidious position when you change things, because wargamers hate change, right? But you've done it, stuck to your guns, made it a better game. And I'm using the word game very purposely, because it is a great game. And that's my number one takeaway from this year. I'll chip in some more, but I'll let someone else talk. But that's what I think at the moment.
Okay, well, thanks. Yeah, and as I said, thanks for asking your club mates, because you are the newest bun, aren't you?
I have been appointed to the bun shop. I said it took me 2 years to get in, but they've allowed me in.
Okay, it's a long time since they had a new bun, isn't it?
1987.
Oh, blimey.
Wow.
Okay, so well, congratulations all round.
I have to admit, I'm very, very similar to Ray. I enjoy Meg as a game. I have great historical interests, but in terms of wargaming, I find it a great game. I find the entire setup, and as Ray has also said, I'm agreeing with Ray a lot at the moment. It's very worrying.
Yeah, this is worrying.
Yeah. It is kept fresh, but it's kept fresh in a moderated way. It's not there's massive codex changes and things like that, and old armies go out, new armies come in. It's very subtle. It's a stress for balance as far as I'm concerned, and I find it a deeply interesting game from that point of view. In terms of the tournament scene, I tend only to play tournaments. I occasionally get down clubs, but not very often. I have a few fixed opponents that I tend to play in practice games, much like Ray. And viability, as long as there's enough people to make the competition viable, that's great for me as far as I'm concerned. I'll rock up with something weird and wonderful and either sink like a stone or plunge out of the water like some sort of orca. They get clobbered on the top table in the last round. Well, I'm about the right size for an orca.
Yeah.
Need the right.
I've got this image of you breaching
Oh God.
Right. Now there's
Thanks,
a
that,
comment to throw us off.
Yeah.
I hope I'm not trying to blow smoke up people's bottoms, but I really do believe it's become a great game for tournaments, and the lists that support that. And I know we have some issues, and if we talk about rules momentarily, I'll make some comments from my club mates, because not from me, because I don't know the rules. But what I would say about the competitions, it's clear to me the tournament scene is if the word's coalescing. So we've got a really hardcore group of people, and the fact that the two people on here probably went to 17, said they went to 17 tournaments. Matt and I probably went to 12. It's coalescing around a group of, I'd say, 20 hardcore players, and I think that's borne out by the statistics. I also think that the one thing that disappoints me, although hopefully we picked up someone recently, is that first-time players, and you can't include the Havoc on the Handball crowd, because that was a club competition, really. First-time tournament players, they come to the tournament, but do they come back? I don't know. The jury's out on that, and I think numbers are down, and I hope next year they'll bounce back up. I think everyone's having a tough time. We think about, all of us have organised tournaments. So, with Ice and Fire, when I was responsible for that, I would say I want the price to be as cheap as possible. Yeah, but that's 20 quid, Ray, you're saving people. They've got to go and get a hotel. They've got to go out for food. It's actually the smallest bill of the weekend is paying for the tournament. So I think people are struggling at the moment. It is tough for people, and maybe they're being more selective. I don't know, but I don't think MeG grew in 2024.
I think it stayed about the same.
Yeah.
It would be my view on that. I think it's a very good point about the cost of competitions. This year I've been to quite a lot, but some of them I did actually choose to commute to rather than stay over in a hotel. Where I live, I can get to Battlefield Hobbies, and even if it's a 2-day competition, the drive isn't so bad as to make it impractical. And it would, although I've got to put the fuel in the car, that's significantly cheaper than the hotel, and then the inevitable beer and curry that goes with it. And much though that's very, very enjoyable, and I love sitting around chewing the fat and talking rubbish with my wargaming mates. But if you do that every 2 weeks, that adds up. So I think your point on the cost is very pertinent. I would say I've noticed hotel prices this year were noticeably more expensive than last year on average. Don't know what Matt and Richard think on
that. Hotel costs have certainly risen, and I'm sure cost is a factor for people. The other comment I would make is I've done events other than tournaments. So through the Society of Ancients, we did a MeG Pacto campaign at Colours this year, which attracted quite a bit of interest. And further to that, also was demoing the Rome Total War board game, which can be extended into MeG Pacto at Warfare, which probably got more interest from the board game, to be honest, because we didn't really get into the Pacto gaming as part of that weekend. There is some interest out there, but not a huge amount in terms of attracting wargamers into MeG who perhaps aren't typically MeG wargamers at the moment. There's some awareness of MeG as a rule set, but not perhaps as high as we might like it to be. I guess while we're on the subject of State of MeG, I think we should send our best wishes to Simon, who's, as some people may know, has been suffering illness and has been in hospital for quite a while now. But hopefully he's getting better and will be out soon.
Yes, indeed, absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you for mentioning that, Richard. It's been very remiss of me not to start this section with that, really. Yeah, so certainly for me, best wishes, Simon. I'd love to see you obviously well and across the table again, or anyway, let's have a drink, something like that. So fingers crossed.
Yeah, I mean, I think I was looking at Mad Axman, Tim's statistics on the tournament scene this year, and MeG did come out as the second most played tournament game this year. After Ligue.
I think it's been that for a few years.
I think it has. Yeah, I think you're right.
So while some of the fog events have had actually greater numbers, I think it's just the quantity of MeG games which has still propelled us into a sort of higher level overall.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, one of the challenges with any new player in a tournament event is making sure they're welcomed, and even if they struggle to get the results, feel they get enough enjoyment to want to come back and get better. I think that's onus on the whole community, really.
I mean, where we've had success is people who have come with their club mates have loved it. I mean, was it Ribble, one of the guys from up north who came with his club mates? I think he came second.
He did. So, Andy Catlow. I was just looking at
Catlow, and I'll tell you what, I bet you he'll be back.
Yeah, so coming second, it definitely propelled him. But I would mention there were two guys. One was Jimmy Carter, and I've forgotten the other guy's name. Oh, apologies to him.
Who were at Warfare?
No, I think the two guys at BritCon.
At BritCon, from Ely Club.
Yeah,
there were, yes.
Who I'm desperately looking it up. It was Paul O'Brien. Yeah. Who certainly after I reached out to them and asked them what they thought, and they were positive about it. It's just, they're not. They play a whole variety of games. MeG is just one of the games. So unlike, say, myself, I basically just play war game MeG. They play a large number of games, but they said they enjoyed BritCon. They felt welcome, so that was positive. So obviously, thank you to everybody who made them feel welcome. But I think they might do one or two a year most, because they're doing so much other stuff. I think that's one thing about. I think certainly the regulars on any competition scene where you've got as many competitions as we have, and I would think it's the same for something like ADLG, is you probably find a large number of the games played are with a smaller hardcore of players, aren't they? I go to 15, however many, so maybe 16 in this country this year, so I rack up quite a lot of games that way. Sorry, Matt, we've not got your input so far.
No, that's fine. I was just thinking, I was trying to think of the best way to put it. We've got a very reasonably large organizer field as well, who put a lot of time and effort into this. I mean, you see, I was about to go look names up because I didn't want to miss somebody but there's like Will Denham, Pete Entwistle, Jeff, Nick, Ray's stuck his oar in a few times, Lawrence Donahue, Robbins.
You have to say Sid, because no one knows who Lawrence Donahue is. Sid.
It's true.
Sid. Yes, Sid.
Pete Cross.
Pete Cross.
Pete Cross.
Pete Cross. Yeah.
So there's a lot of people willing to put the work in, and I mean,
I think that's
to give us all the weekend's enjoyment. Sorry, Ray.
I think that's a really good point. We have a lot of people willing. It doesn't fall on one or two people, which is a great strength.
And whoever comes up with the themes as well, I think that helps a great deal. We've had a lot of really fun competitions this year with some really.
Well, I've got a suggestion for my club, a bit tongue in cheek about a competition. If you want to hear it at some point.
Oh, go on then.
Yeah, I'll throw it out.
So, because it's so ridiculous. I have to get it up in front of me. What it actually is. So anyway, so it's it's an extreme event, and it's called 666. So lists must be from the year 666 before Common Era to 666 Common Era.
Yeah.
Only 6 cards. You must have 6 tugs and 6 sugs. It'll probably come in about 7,000 points. But I tell you what, it would be hilarious. I will say no one from my club volunteered to organise it.
Did they say they would play it?
Oh, I think we might have a Christmas special next Wednesday and have a go at it. I don't know. Well, no, we're far too serious practicing for Ice and Fire.
6 tugs, 6 sugs, 6 cards.
6 cards.
Oh my
Year
God.
666 to 666.
Oh dear, oh dear, oh dear. Oh, well, there you are. There's a thought. Something to dig
already
into
planning
over
his
Christmas.
list.
Yeah, early Tibetan.
Early Tibetan.
That's outside 666.
Oh, is it too late for that? All right, I'll have to be Parthian then.
Yeah. Otherwise, you'd go. Oh, I'll have something with Kyle's.
I think I'd go Alexandrian expedition route.
That's not allowed, is it?
Can it have 6 tugs?
Yeah, I think so. Companions and phalangites using javelins.
Yeah. Well, actually, there's a good example of what actually might be. It might be quite. It's a good talking point. Competition theme, isn't it? We started straight away thinking.
I know. Planning the list.
What fits in there? What's there? It's and I think that's. And we've had a number of competitions like that this year. I think it's definitely good to have the old favourites. The toils and such like in there. Having some of these, which make they're probably the ones people talk about, aren't they? So just pick up one thing, because I think both Richard and Ray mentioned this. They said as long as the competition has enough players to be viable. So what is that number? Because I played it once, which it wasn't this year, it was last year. We only had 6 at Chariots of Fire. I think we only had 8 this year, didn't we? But those two actually they were really, really good competitions, but probably not. How long term can you keep going with? If it's a different 6 every year.
Did you make it a 1 day or was it a 2 day?
They were 2 days, but I think certainly in 2023 it fell on an unfortunate date. Unfortunately,
right.
So, but some teams are more popular than others. But in general, what would you think a good number to have at a 2-day competition is? Sort of the minimum to keep it viable for a few years.
I don't know, because I think you got the sort of marquee events, your BritCons, your Skull Rollers, your Warfares. If there are any more marquee events, I apologise for absence.
Ice and Fire, mate, the one you started.
Yeah, Ice and Fire maybe, but that will be challenged in January. I think those marquee events, you've got to be looking at 28 for it to be a proper marquee event, in my opinion. But that's not the same question. That's not the question you asked. You said, what is it to make it viable? Yeah. I think you know me, I always like to give my opinion, because of what's the point of coming on here if I don't. I think for the viability of tournaments going forward, if you don't get 20 people to the tournament you choose to go to, so I wouldn't choose to go to one that was a very focused thing. It's a different kind of thing. That's fine. I'm not dissing it. I'm just saying I wouldn't choose to go to Chariots of Fire. But so if you don't have at least 20, you're then beginning. You start to get the diminishing returns, because actually I'm going to play the same person in round 1, the same person in round 2. Oh no, I've got Sid in round 3. That means I don't podium. It's not that podium's everything, obviously, but I think you go below 20, I don't think it's viable.
I'll pitch the number at 16 being 2. So the idea with 16 is if you've got a 4-round event, you've got a reasonable possibility of having a clear winner. You're not going to have two people who both win all 4 of their games
Fair enough. Fair
and
dues.
come out.
But what you might find, Richard, if you have 16, now correct me if I'm wrong, but you have to reach down for the person in the final round to play for someone who hasn't played before, and all of a sudden that can skew things. You need enough to make it that the people vying for the fight, you don't want someone on top table who's actually in 12th position because everyone else, because of the way.
No, I think actually with 16 that shouldn't happen.
Okay, fine.
Unless I've misunderstood the maths.
No, I've not done the maths. I'm just shooting from the head.
That's why I would pitch it at 16. Yeah. I mean, I personally would say I don't. Yeah, I mean, I'm quite happy if a competition has 6 or 8 if it's a good competition. But I would say if all the competitions only got 8 players, that would be a big concern. But I think if you get a few events where you're getting over, say, 24 or something, if you've got most events around the sort of 16 plus mark, and then there are, I mean, the Chariots of Fire, the biblical theme is always going to be a small competition, but it's one I really love because I do particularly enjoy the interactions of the biblical era. So I'm quite happy if there are only 8 players, but playing biblical. It is, so I think it's as much the range of competitions as it is the actual size of any individual competition.
It is just on that. If 16, I agree. Is the maths works on the sorting on Swiss chess, doesn't it? For if you've got over 16, you theoretically should have a 5th round, and then if it goes above, probably 32, isn't it? The next one. Anyway, I just had a quick look out of the, because I've jotted it down previously. Out of the 17 competitions I did, if we were taking 16 as the magic number, 8 out of the 17 met that. If you took it at 12, it'd be 11. And just talking about, back to Ray's marquee number sort of thing, only Ice and Fire this year got that far up.
So, really?
Yeah.
What about Skull Rollers?
Skull Rollers. Oh, I didn't do Skull Rollers.
28 at Skull Rollers this year.
Yeah. Yes.
Hammer to Hammer had 22. That was an interesting competition there again, Richard. It kind of having to pick a duchy or whatever we had to do.
Yeah,
pick a country.
Yeah.
I mean,
sorry.
Carry on. If I was thinking about tournaments kind of from a helicopter point of view, not from I just like going to tournaments, I would say Warfare worried me this year. I got a kind of pit in my stomach when I saw that only 12 people. I remember going to. I've played 5 different systems at Warfare when it was in Reading and all that, and to see it, I don't know what happened this year.
There is I would say specifically for that, quite a few people have commented on the entry price.
Yeah, 50 quid to not go to any of the things apart from play a game. It's not good, is it?
It's pushing, and then the point you made earlier, Ray. Of course, if you hotel,
I
was there for one night. The hotel in a Premier was 80 something quid. And even if you then just have a modest meal and a Diet Coke, obviously it's my choice. It was then my choice to sit there and drink quite a few pints of beer while chatting. But even if you don't do that, you're talking. You can very, very easily get to a couple of £100.
Yep.
Especially when you take the travel costs.
Yep.
And I think I do worry that Warfare is pushing that. I mean, if they don't increase the price for the next couple of years, if essentially inflation will work its way to make it look more affordable. But It is what it is. Yeah.
I mean, you had some good players. You had some good players there. There's no problem with that. I mean,
Yeah, I mean,
I
think it was a classic year. Everybody enjoyed themselves.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I agree. It's a competition we used to get very big numbers for.
I mean, I hate to mention the ADLG thing, but you know, did they have the same problem with the same? They got the same community. We're all the same. I mean,
I've no idea what their numbers were.
Huh?
So I've no idea what their numbers were. I tend to ignore all of this.
We mustn't look for the wrong answer. Is all I'm saying. We've got to be open-minded.
To be fair, for Warfare's point of view, they did actually pretty much fill or sell more tickets than they did the previous year. So
you're absolutely right. Yes,
they are doing something right. And so, I mean, and in my point of view, because I commuted, so the 50 quid wasn't a big issue. But as Nick says, if there's been a hotel involved, I possibly wouldn't have done it. But I guess from our point of view, it's not great. From the organisers' point of view, they're still getting the numbers. So it's either got to be a more popular competition for MeG. From our point of view, we've got to make it more interesting so people want to do it. And I mean, to be fair, we also had a competition only 2 weeks beforehand, which was a very similar theme. So that might have impacted numbers. But we don't know. It'll come out in the wash, I'm sure, because the previous year we had 33 or something.
Absolutely.
So, you know, it goes up and down. So and I mean, the bumbling charm of Warfare's organisers occasionally drives me insane, but I go back every year.
Yeah, can I just say, in case anybody from the Reading Club thinks we're having a go at them on that respect, my experience of the new guy who took over from Dave Mather this year was very positive. He was very helpful and kept in communication. So. If there was any bumbling organisation, it wasn't him.
Yeah, and as I say, I go back every year. So,
well, there you are. Yeah, but I think we do have a good range of competitions, and I think that is important as well. It's not 15 classical competitions. There's some old favourites. You've got your classicals and your early medievals, and you do have the chariot one, as Richard said. That's does inevitably seem to be a less popular one, and then we get we get ones like, as Ray just mentioned, the last Ribble one, the hammer to hammer, where there's limited armies and you can't double up unless on the whole. So I think that's a very healthy thing, and it is about us enjoying ourselves.
Yeah,
as much as we can, throwing dice.
Indeed, and we had the interesting themes like foot sloggers as well.
Yep.
Which was great fun.
Yes, so I'm just laughing because circumstances meant it was a very odd weekend for me. That one.
Yeah, sorry about that, Nick.
But it's just the way that fell out, and it's just, sometimes it does. But yeah, exactly. And I think that's one. I think we ran that a couple of years ago. I don't think it's a competition you'd want to run every year, but running it every couple of years is a goodie. So, and I would.
By the way, there is a bit of an unsung hero in this, and I'm sorry to the listeners who aren't, going to tournaments, but we have Paul Cummins, who brings all the results together and produces a ranking of players. And I don't look at it every day, but I do find that quite satisfying, looking at the results.
I quite like looking at it as well when it's updated, and it's a bit of fun.
Yeah,
I'm actually gobsmacked I'm still as high up as I am. So
I've got a theory that you and Richard, I can't include Matt in this, but I've got a theory that you and Richard have been trying to play yourself down a bit. You don't want to be the big boys anymore.
I expect it to fall quite dramatically this year because of my personal choice in armies. I wanted to try different things, some of which were a tad ropey, shall we say. But again, I suppose the advantage of playing so many competitions, if you get a few good results, it can boost your thing. Anyway, I think
Matt Hayward brings a weird army to every competition, and he's 5th in the tournament ranking.
Yeah, I was just looking at where we were. Matt, out of the 4 of us here today, Matt is the highest, followed by Ray, myself, and Richard. Practically, in 9 and 10, we're all in the top 10.
I would point out 2 of those scores though are with using Swiss, so I can hardly call that a ropey army, to be perfectly honest. But
That's true. That's true.
I mean, yeah, but yeah, many competitions. Anyway, I think the important thing with those rankings, of course, is to remember that's a bit of fun, folks.
yes,
If anybody's listening to this thinking, what are they getting too serious? No, really, nobody
really
takes it. It's a good giggle, a few bragging points, and yeah.
I've actually never heard, apart from me on this podcast, I've never been in a pub when someone said to me, "What's your ranking, Ray?"
No, exactly, yes.
I wouldn't have even known what my ranking was.
So it would be remiss of me, and I will obviously not be allowed to play on Wednesday if I don't tell you. I've only got 3 pieces of feedback because the tournament is like this petri dish, isn't it, for rules, and it puts the rules under stress, and really.
It does.
And I've only, believe it or not, I've only got 3 things that I want to mention. That's not bad, is it?
Go for it then.
But remember, I don't know the rules, so I'm just going to have to say something, and you'll go, "Oh yeah, you mean no." So the moving skirmishers out the way before a charge. I'm not even going to suggest that there's lots of things you could do, but considering the main user of this cheese is in my club, we think this is smelly cheese. So it may only happen rarely, but as one of the wags said, rare cheese is still cheese.
I think another good user of it is on this podcast.
That would be Mr. Hayward, would it? Who puts his bloody light horse behind you when he moves out the way. Yes.
Yep.
It's in the rules. It's in the rules. So
yeah.
that, I think that needs to be something done.
A little birdie has told me there is a cure for that at some point.
Good. And then the thing that
we shoot everybody who does it.
Well, for people's benefit, I should say that there are a list of things in MeG which could be subject to a change in future. There are no plans for when that might happen, but I have drawn together a list, and certainly the withdrawing skirmishers before a charge is on that list.
I like this. He's got a little list. It's coming
I have
all
a little
Ricardo
list
on us, isn't it?
I heard Lance
them
gave
will
you
be
30
missed.
pages. I thought Lance gave you 30 pages in stuff.
Yeah, he
Come
gave
on,
me
then,
30 pages.
What are the other 2 then, Ray? You said
Well,
you
the
had
other
3.
one, and I mean, Richard suggested, someone suggested quite a stern punishment for the moving skirmishers thing, but I believe culprits who do this should be hung, drawn, and quartered, and that's aligning to get less bases fighting. I'm sorry, it's appalling, and I know Richard is going to change it, aren't you, Richard?
It is also on the list.
And it really won't be missed.
Exactly. And when your opponent aligns after, I mean, anyway, whatever. After the impact phase, they align to get less bases in contact, and then they fill the gap that they've created with something better at fighting you. I'm sorry, it's just, you know what? Why I like it in one level is I'm not clever enough to think about it, so I kind of chapeau. You've done it to me, but it's appalling. And then the only other one is, I think Matt's caused this one mostly, although he was pretty responsible for the first one as well, is the generals fighting in a file, and they end up fighting 4 times. That needs sorting. I'm not even clever enough to understand what, but I think we're calling that the Swiss pipe cheese, counting 4 times.
Yeah, well, I would say I emulated the greatest proponent of that, who was Will Denham.
Oh,
he originated it. I just tweaked it. But yes,
You got it up to the full 4, did you?
I think I got 3 at one point. I don't think I ever made the 4th, because I think
I've heard there were 4, Matt. But anyway, so is that on the list, Richard? Is that on the list?
It is now.
Just say yes, Richard.
Sorry, I just didn't grasp what the request was.
Can we just advise you say yes?
I'll say yes.
Matt has to explain what he's done.
No.
Yeah, it's if a general is with a file, and that file is fighting in multiple directions, the general can count as plus each time.
Yeah, that certainly is on the list. Sorry, I just hadn't grasped that was what you were referring to.
Yeah, there's the follow on from Ray's thing, actually, because it falls logically out of it, and it's something Matt suggested could be raised. Actually, do you want to raise it since you suggested it, Matt, the shatter thing?
Oh yeah, it has appeared in various on the WhatsApp group, and it may even be on the forum. I hadn't looked. Was that there was a suggestion made that the Pacto version of the shatter and shove rules should be play tested in 2025 at some of our competitions.
It
if
was,
I understand, go on, Richard.
Yeah, so just to explain the rule, instead of counting the +1 or +2 claim for neighbouring files, instead the file that gets a shatter re-rolls a bonus dice. So if it's a shatter, they roll a green dice as a bonus. If it's a shove, they roll a white dice as a bonus. And then that result adds. So to take an example, if you were a devastating charger on even factors and you roll either a skull or an S, so would normally be able to claim the shatter, you would roll a bonus green dice. The net effect of that can be quite impactful because you can in effect get a double skull from a single file. Doesn't happen that often because it's a 1 in 6, but it contributes. The maths has been done, and it actually, the effects are fairly equivalent to the current system. The maths is actually quite complex, and it actually makes the game very slightly bloodier for both sides, actually, because the impact also works the other way, because instead of getting the negative, in effect, the claim against you on 2 files, you actually only get the impact straight away. So it was actually tested at was it Rouet we played it?
No, I think it was it the one you went to in Switzerland, the Helvetica one?
Oh, sorry, yeah, it was Helvetica in Switzerland. We actually played it. The feedback was actually incredibly positive. Everybody actually thought it speeded up the game and found it perhaps more interesting than the current mechanism.
It has a very significant advantage in my point of view as well, is that if you're only contacting with a single file, and I think this especially applies to shatters, that only happens in the charge phase, you still have a chance of something happening. So it can, to some, you do see people maneuvering to try and get only one file in contact, so that even if somebody gets a shatter, they get no benefit from it. Which, yeah, I've done it. It never feels nice. So, and it also means you'd have to start thinking about which order of combats you're doing. Do I roll the middle file out of 3 or an end file to get, to try and get the shatters or shoves rolling? It's just because you get an instant result.
Yeah, I mean, I think in fairness, I would say there weren't too many armies. There were only 6 of us playing at Helvetica, so I think there weren't that many armies which had a lot of shatters anyway. But the general feedback was positive, and I think it will likely be played at Brussels this year.
I'm certainly thinking of trying it at a competition I'm organising as well, which I'm not sure which one or multiple ones, but I just think it's a cleaner mechanism.
Yeah. While we're on this topic, as some people may have seen, I am in the process of collecting situations for diagrams. My intention is in future to basically produce a bit along the lines I produced for block moves, a sort of I suppose, reference guide of diagrams for rule situations. So if anybody does have particular rule situations where they feel the rules could be clearer and diagrams might help, please get in touch. And if they occur in games, take a photo and send it through to me.
Yeah, please, photos. Photos are so much easier than descriptions or trying to use ASCII diagrams. No, appreciate it's not all, people don't always remember that. Okay, I'm just wondering.
Sorry, my opinion on the using the Pacto shatter and shove, I'm fully 100% behind it. So if someone did it at a tournament, it wouldn't put me off. It would attract me to the tournament rather than put me off. If it's successful in a bigger tournament, then where we have some, viable stats, then, we could roll out as a tournament rule. I mean, I'm no problem with that.
Yeah, I think on that, the important thing is Richard said from what I've seen of the stats, and I do not have the statistical maths to to do it myself, but it's broadly the same effect.
Yep.
Except it as Richard said, it does, because the things like the single file can have an effect, and if you're facing a file that would currently get the +2, you're less likely to go down a colour. It makes the overall thing slightly bloodier overall anyway. So it's like speeding of the game. So
yeah,
it is. Yeah, I'm just wondering if we should just wrap up this section now. We've gone through quite a bit actually. It's gone on pleasantly longer than I thought it might. Unless anybody's got anything that's burning that they want to add to that. But I think some good stuff in there. I think we're pretty positive about things, but acknowledging that there are things we'd like to see happen otherwise. But
I think the game's a great. I think the game's a great game, a great tournament game, and we owe it to the game to get more people to come and play it.
Yeah. Matt, anything final thoughts on this section before I dob you in on the next one?
A shout out to Robin for all his efforts in rounding up people to come play in the competitions. I haven't mentioned him in the various discussions we've had around that. So a shout out to him and the list checkers, obviously, of which there are at least 2 here.
Yeah, a thankless task, especially when you come away going, "Oh, I can't believe I got that wrong."
Yeah. Well, I've just managed to do that this evening, so I'm guilty of my own problems there. So yeah, but that covers the last 2 I had in my mind.
Okie dokie. Anyway, as I said, I am going to dob Matt in on the next one because, as I said at the beginning, I think maybe just a quick overview of the state of play on 3D printed miniatures. Partly, I just think they're just getting a lot more available, a lot more popular. But Matt is definitely big into it. I'm sure by the end of 2025 he will have bought the world's biggest 3D printer to get through his addiction on 3D. How big was that extra hard drive you had to buy to keep your files on?
It's a terabyte, so I've already half filled it. So,
so I think that is probably very well placed to just to give an overview on. So I don't know if there's any big technology things have happened, but I think mainly probably Matt on the availability of historical miniatures. So I'll leave it up to you to rattle on about this.
Indeed. Right. Okay. For the context of the listeners, anybody who hadn't caught me rambling on about it in previous podcasts, I started my 3D printing journey April of this year after having bought one at Christmas and had it sat there waiting, just ready to go. And so once I kicked that off, I started looking around, and from April to now, the 28mm to 15mm ranges have exploded in the 3D printing world. There are, if you follow Kickstarter, for example, you will find quite a few Kickstarters out there for Samurai. There's a Sumerian one or Akkadian one going at the moment. Somebody's just done the Ameshi for the Japanese lists, for example, usually in 28mm, but they shrink down. That's the advantage of 3D printing. So it's only going to get bigger. Now, if you follow some of the economic news around metal prices and also EU trade sanctions or trading rules, whatever you want to call them at the moment, that are complicating the selling of metal miniatures, 3D printing is a viable opportunity. A context in size, I probably spent about £300 on my setup, which is not an unreasonable amount of money. However, the first army I printed was a Swiss pike army, and that would have cost me more than £300 in metal. So you could say it's cost neutral-ish. Timing's a bit more out.
But we wish you hadn't after facing
it. Yeah, I keep bringing the Swiss up. Oh, by the way, Swiss, if I haven't mentioned it before. So in that context, I will say it is an entirely separate hobby from toy soldiers. It's a hobby in itself. You can use it to print toy soldiers, but it is kudos to Robin, who's looking at it at the moment. We've had quite a few discussions on the subject, and he's gone about it very thoughtfully. And I would recommend anybody that's thinking about playing around with 3D printing to talk to somebody who's already doing it. Go watch them do the process if you can. Just see the time it's taken, the detritus that you get out of it, because there is cleaning fluids which are caustic. The resin itself is toxic. The setup that you need, ideally open space, not in your home, though if you've got a spare room with decent airflow, which I have, you can do it. So yeah, if you want to get into it, get into it. Once you're into it, it will take over your life. Because wargamers are not susceptible to obsession at all, really, honest. No, we don't do that kind of thing. I personally have had a great deal of pleasure playing around with it. If you're of the mind, there are programs like Blender, which are a full interface for manipulating STL files. Well, they use them for CGI in films. That's where it originally came from, I believe, the Blender programs. Look on YouTube, you'll find a deliriously large amount of stock on how you can use Blender to alter STL files. You can change the poses, you can do whatever you want if you can think of a way to do it. Working out the mechanics in itself is a joy. So as an easy example, you get one general figure in a pack of STL files. Sorry, there's me rabbiting on. STL file is the raw graphical file that you load into the printer that tells you what the shape of the program, the figure is or whatever, and then you print it off from that. That's the raw building block for the figure you're about to print. And you can resize it. So if you buy it in 28mm, you can shrink it down to 15mm simply by telling you what scale is. So I don't know, if it's a 28mm, you say 54%. It's 15 to 18%, depending on the sculptor's choice of what he believes 28mm was. Yeah, it's an entire world of entertainment. And as I said at the beginning, the ranges are forever expanding. Nick and I were discussing it earlier. There's one of the guys that sculpts some of the figures that we both really like. He's considering Parthian, I think, at the moment, but he's also got Islamics on the list, possibly for 2026, because he thinks, well, one of the reasons Nick was talking to him about it was because, we think there's a hole in the market for that kind of thing. Paul Cummings, that was mentioned earlier, does the rankings. He's playing around with a lot of things and looking at actually sculpting them. Far more talent than I've got. I can manipulate existing files, but I couldn't sculpt something. And then there's cost. Cost, as I said earlier, a plate of 18 figures on my printer costs me 38p in resin. That's 15mm infantry figures. That's for the entire 18 figures. It's 38p, and the electricity cost is pretty minor because it's basically an LED light that is shining on a resin plate. So the caveat with that is the time taken to clean it all up. So
yeah, it's
I'm with you.
How you value your time, isn't it?
Yes, exactly. If you've got the time spare, well, to be fair, the print side's quick. You put the figure in the program, press print, it goes off to the printer, and it just churns away. It's about an hour or hour and a half to clean up afterwards, depending on how many you've printed, or you do it in bulk jobs, or if you've got children, train them to do it. Free labor. Yes, exactly. And on that note, the technology is ever increasing. I mean, I've got what is called one of the mid-range hobbyist plates, so it's quite small. So as I say, 18 to 20 figures is about normal. I could get off that comfortably. There are ones that will quite comfortably print 50 to 80, but obviously the cost gets higher, the maintenance is a bit more, and you go from there. I am talking resin printing for those that are looking at the other plastic FTL style ones. That I have no concept around, to be honest, and they're not recommended for toy soldiers as such.
But good for scenery, I believe.
Oh yes, exceptionally good if you want to print big, bulky items cheaply, castles, that kind of thing. If you want big, broad scenery, definitely the way to go with those.
Yeah. Matt, obviously, as you said, we've been talking about this, and I developed an STL file habit of my own. And that, I think, over the last few months, really, my impression is, as well as the sheer volume of stuff that's becoming available in the sort of ancients, medieval, historical market, which is what I've been looking at, the quality from a sort of historical verisimilitude angle is on the up as well, because I think a lot of people who were doing the sculpting, for want of a better word, came from a more fantasy background.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I mean, the early samurai stuff that we looked at, they were much more fantasy based, although credible at 15 mil for historical figures. But yes, you've got there's Medbury Miniatures, who's doing some absolute stunning Viking and 100 Years War figures. Lovely stuff. 10 Kingdoms are doing some really quite nice Chinese, and they've just finished Khitan, and they're on Koreans at the moment.
Yeah.
Again, the historical, from what we've read, the sculptor's he is actually quoting his historical references as he goes through, so which is really nice to see, because you can see where he's getting his ideas from and where he's pitching it. And again, a lot of the later medieval stuff, like Swiss, for example, I don't know why that came to mind. Again, they are very clearly referenced out of medieval manuscripts. There's a guy that's doing war wagons. I want to say Northern Crusades miniatures, but I might be wrong on that one. Again, based on Hussite or German of Hussite war wagons. Same principle. It's very clearly very historically based. Trying to think what else has recently come up that I've seen that I've been really impressed with.
To be honest, I'm losing track. I have to keep. Well, there was those Hungarian horse archers I got.
Oh yes, for Scrofar.
The Scrofar ones, yeah. Because I remember you saying they were some of the most accurate Hungarian horse archers you'd seen in any material.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. They matched an Italian manuscript that was from Huniardi's time in Italy, and they were absolutely spot on. Lovely figures, and his Franks are quite similar as well. They're quite. Once you swap some shields around for personal preference, but again, they're the same. And the other thing about the 3D printed world is the dynamism of the figures. The poses are far more emphatic, because there's no mold limitations of where the lines have to fit, and you can't get the rubber in the wrong place, that kind of thing, for the silicon. They can do some quite lifelike and extremely exciting stuff. As I say, Medbury Miniatures, if you go look at his Viking range, some of those figures are stunning in the terms of their poses and just sheer look. So again, that's another advantage of 3D printing. You just get some great figures out of it.
I think, can you guys hear me? I think the other thing I'd say is from getting them onto the table to game with, painting's easier as well. They paint beautifully.
I found that, definitely.
Yeah, I wouldn't disagree with that. There's definitely something about the material and the way it handles primer and how the paint flows. I would 100%. And the other thing I would say that I haven't mentioned is, a lot of people say resin is brittle and it will break. Yes, this is true, but I would say that, having pretty much only used resin for the last 6 months, I think I've lost 3 spears, and that's about the worst of the damage that I've had. And I've dropped things and I'm not the most patient to people when moving my figures about and putting them in boxes. So
Well, I think
it-
there's
So
more
go on.
specialist resin, if you like, available now, isn't there?
Yeah,
That has flex in it. I mean, I remember when we last talked about this, I remember Graham Clacker was definitely saying things are a bit brittle, or can be brittle. But I think you can now get some really quite resilient resin that works at 15 mil. And yes, you can drop it. You can bend it. I mean, I found, I think it might have been some 10 Kingdoms ones I've got. I could actually drill the hands out. So if
yeah. I mean,
don't ask me why I even tried it, but spare figure. Oh, let's see what happens. Just with a pin vise, you could actually drill the hand out.
I mean, yeah, there are some. I've tried some of them. They're a bit expensive for my taste, I admit, because I print a lot.
Yeah.
I use a standard Elegoo resin, which works out at £18 per kilogram, and that's one of their basic entry ranges. It's
I think that's the difference now from last time we spoke about it. The basic resins were still quite brittle, and then you had to pay a hell of a lot to get a more flexible one. But as these things get cheaper over time, greater demand, top of the range resins are still, I understand, quite expensive, but certainly the stuff you print in is pretty resilient.
Yeah. So it's a brave new world out there, and I think we could see some quite interesting. I mean, I'm genuinely waiting for somebody to start buying up things like Chariot miniatures and then putting them through a 3D scanner and remodeling them that way, because you could literally do that for the file and then just print them 3D in 3D resin. So I think that's another way that we might see it going.
Richard, are you tempted by 3D figures? Or you have an enormous collection anyway. So.
Yeah, I have to say it's I've watched with interest the 3D ranges. As you may well know, painting is not my forte, and I have a big enough collection at the moment. Having had to shift it all into the garage and then shift it back into my spare room, I've decided it's definitely big enough for the time being.
I see resin is lighter.
Yeah,
Indeed, maybe, but yes, it's the volume that's the issue more than the weight.
Yeah. Okay, Matt, thanks for that. I think it's just a useful, hopefully for people listening, it's a useful update. And I think one of the big takeaways I would suggest from that is that there are now a lot more and ever increasing number of good historical miniatures out there. But equally, it all comes with a caveat that if you're going to do it yourself, make sure you've got time for a whole second hobby and somewhere you can do it in.
Yep.
Richard, do you want to give us just a quick one on the 2025 list PDFs, and then we shall get on to what might be the comedy section of this podcast.
So, 2025 lists. Generally, this year, any army that you used in 2024, with a few exceptions, should still be valid for 2025. The bulk of the changes in the army lists have actually been as a result of all the historical work that I did, identifying over 5,000 battles and campaigns, which I did from sort of November this time last year, really, through till about August time. As a result of that, I've identified about 15 new allies for various armies, most of which are probably of only real specific interest to historical focused games, but there are a few which I think might appear in the tournament scene. Just as an example, I think it's Middle Swiss that now can have a later medieval German ally, with a few restrictions, but I could see that one being possibly quite popular. Yeah, go. By the way, you can go to the MeG forum. There's a link on the MeG forum to the draft 2025 lists, and you can at the top of the folder is a list of all the changes for 2025. So that's the place to go to if you're interested. I've done a few of the lists have had a name change, either for historical reasons to conform with the prevailing naming convention in most historical circles, but a few just to tidy up as well. So, for example, the Tibetan lists are now Tibetan Empire for the earlier Tibetan list and late Tibetan for the later Tibetan list. So there are a few name changes like that have gone on. There are 9 new armies lists, which are Luwian kingdoms, which is the historical version of Troy. That's for the Western Anatolia between about 1500 and 1200 BC. There are 4 European lists, Villanovan Italian, Proto-Celtic, Tartessian and early Iberian, and they cover Italy, Gaul and Spain from about 700 BC down to 400 BC. And then there are a few others. There's Caucasian Iberian, which is for the armies of Lazica and Iberia. That's in the Caucasus, not in Spain, from about 400 BC through to 500 AD or CE. There is Duchy of Naples, which is a sort of poor man's Byzantine army that fought the Lombards and invited the Normans as allies, and then were conquered by them about 100 years later. They also allied with the Saracens as well. Along with that, there is Lanzhang, which is the army of medieval Lausch. So that's the army of 1 million elephants and a white parasol. For those of interest, must have the white parasol. Yeah, sorry, it is in the news section.
Thanks for that, Ray. Useful to flag people in the right direction.
Yeah, I still haven't found it. Which is it?
Go into the news topic, and it's the second one down, unpinned, army lists for 2025.
I thought it was so important it would be pinned, you see.
Maybe it should, but
that would smack of organisation.
No, it will be pinned when they become official, which will be around the New Year time. It would probably be a few days before New Year, actually.
Thank you, Richard.
Okay, as well as that, Richard, and to tee up the next bit, could I just ask you to mention the army builder change?
So this was touched upon at the introduction. So the only points change for 2025 is that we have reduced the cost of mediocre army commanders. So if you now want a mediocre professional general as your army commander, that will only cost you 250 points instead of 450, saving you a huge 200 points. If you want to go for a mediocre instinctive commander, That has been reduced from 250 points to 0 points. So yes, you can have one of those, and it won't cost you anything at all.
And before people ask, yes, that means your army commander will be cheaper than a mediocre subgeneral. Or, and indeed, for instinctive, cheaper than an instinctive mediocre ally general.
Yes, the rationale behind that is you have to have an army commander. So whereas you don't have to have subgenerals. So yeah.
An instinctive mediocre army commander is absolutely hammered on the PBS and Scout.
Yes. Yes. Well, if we get to our examples, we can have a look at one later.
Well, I think we should move on to the examples, because to round this off the back of this, we have some examples of army lists with mediocre generals, mediocre army commanders. Just because it just seems an interesting challenge just to see what you can get out of it. Actually, I've been quite pleasantly surprised personally, but yeah, I mean, obviously there are issues, and the PBS is the biggest one. So we thought.
Well, I'll mention. I'll go straight into my choice.
Okay, Richard. Yeah.
So I chose Lowland Gallic with a mediocre army commander and 3 competent subgenerals. I wasn't prepared to go lower than that. So that gives me 11 cards to play with. The PBS is a massive 4. So you'll get 2 black cards in your pre-battle maneuvering. And a scouting, I managed to get the scouting up to 2. But that was through an extensive use of cavalry and skirmishers, and even then I only just scraped it.
Yeah.
The army itself has 13 tugs and 2 sugs. So I've got 11 cards to move 13 tugs and 2 sugs. So it's not an army that's going to be dancing around the place, that's for sure. You'll be quite lucky if you get it moving forward, I think. It's got it's got the Solduri. So your mediocre army commander has a bodyguard who's prepared to die for him. It's got 2 units of nobles and followers. So they're the superior. I went for the charge only javelin short spear. Quite frankly, you could have the devastating charger, but you takes your money, pays your money, you takes your choice even. It gets 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 units of warriors. I made them 8. So that's 56 average. Again, protected charge only javelin short spear. Gets 3 units of 6 cavalry, 1 superior and 2 average. Unskilled javelin, short spear, shoot and charge, and a couple of units of javelin skirmishers, 1 6 and 1 9. That gets the scouting up to 2. With an unfortified poor camp. Being tribal flexible, they don't really care what the terrain is. And yeah, you're PBS if you're out scouted. Well, I mean, this is an army, you just line up wall to wall and hopefully start moving forward if you get some lucky cards.
Okay, well, I think we should throw this one to our guest for his reaction.
Reaction to that list or to the whole idea? Firstly, I think you'd have to make it minus 500 points before I get interested in. Well, but again, you know, for certain historical things, it'd be a cool thing. I don't know. I'm thinking of. So some shooty army shoots me and I can't push through fire and can't do anything. I'm stuck. So I can't move and I can't move and push. I'm just stuck. Maybe I'll put some barricades down as well and just say, come and get me. I don't know. I don't know. I'm gobsmacked with your ingenuity just to get a list.
You ain't seen nothing yet.
It's kind.
It's not really you, is it, Ray? Because I know one of the things you always say about your list, you know, you like to have as much control over the PBS as your list will allow, don't you?
Yes, I did.
That's your approach.
I did try that the other day, actually. Just a little anecdote. I had 9 PBS and about, I don't know, 5 scouting or something. And I managed to lose everything. I lost the dice roll. I lost the PBS. I couldn't control the territory. And I lost, and I got out scouted.
Yay!
Hey!
You got everything, yeah. I
It was
think
one
actually to pick one thing you just said there, which I think is one of the big impacts of a mediocre general, is that initial dice roll, isn't it?
Yeah.
You know, you have to accept you are very likely to lose it.
Yeah.
So I think, as Richard said about this particular list, you know, if this had been a Highland Gallic, where all the warriors are loose, I think it could be, you know, that's having a mediocre C&C for that. That falls under the yes minister, a brave decision minister sort of approach, doesn't it? But at least with this one, they are flexible. So anyway, sorry, Matt, I think you were going to say something.
Oh, I was just going to say to Ray, he hasn't seen nothing yet when it comes to mediocre lists. But anyway,
it is, yeah. I mean, there's one thing I would say about this list, Richard. I mean, you know, if you dropped something, you could get 2 of those competent instinctive subgenerals to be talented.
But that would sort of defeat the whole object of the army,
which is to be a huge piece of stodge.
Absolutely.
Commanded by an idiot.
Yeah. I mean, yes, you can get up to 13 cards if you pay for 2 talented instinctives. You're probably dropping it down to 11 tugs, possibly.
You might have to, because the difference between competent and talented is significant. Yeah, sorry, Matt, back to you.
I mean, just to say, I wouldn't actually rate this as a particularly good competition army. It was just an example of what you can do with the change.
Oh yeah, absolutely. This is what we're here for. Matt, so anything else to say on this?
everything shoots though, so you know,
on the
even
charge.
standing there, well, no, even if they're charging you, you still get to shoot.
You do.
So you know, you're still throwing a lot of white dice or a lot of black dice, depending on what's coming at you. And so, you don't actually need to move it very far.
It'll cover a lot of ground. Yeah, actually, I just on that choice on the warriors. You know, I actually prefer the idea of the charge only javelin short spear to the devastating charger option.
I do too. Although now if the Pact OS rule comes in, I might change my mind.
Doesn't really change mine.
The math says it doesn't make you that much difference. So, I mean, you pay your money, you take your choice. I use charge only javelin, short spear, Saxons at footsloggers. And I have to say, if you're facing Iko-Iki, boy, do you enjoy yourself, because you're suddenly shooting at all these unprotected troops.
Oh,
I absolutely mullered them.
Oh, and some of them are poor as well, aren't they?
Yeah.
You basic infantry javelinmen throwing a yellow dice.
Nice.
Oh,
yeah.
Although with the reputation yellow dice have amongst a lot of megas.
Oh, mine were quite happy. I got a good number of skulls.
Yeah. So anyway, I do get the feeling we're not going to see Ray rushing out to get his Gallic collection out to run like this, though.
My only worry about Richard's army is this. Real worry is that if someone else brings a similar army, they're never going to get into combat. And with the MEG scoring system, it's a 2-2. It's all over.
I'm not sure it's quite that bad, but I do know what you mean.
You could have a gentleman's agreement to deploy one base width apart.
Force charge. Yeah, if you did that, you'd then roll so many blanks that
you'd still be rolling up 3.5 hours.
The WhatsApp group would just explode with dice dice
I-
tails.
I do
Again.
have to mention that of foot sloggers, I think one of my games with the early Anglo-Saxons, I think there were 30 files of combat.
That's
And we managed to get through 4 melee turns before one of the armies broke.
wow.
And it was a close run thing.
It's a lot of dice. That's a lot.
Because have you ever worked out in an average tournament game how many dice you actually roll in combat? Sorry, impact or combat.
I
A lot
haven't.
of my armies try
That
and
one.
pull. Sorry,
That
Richard.
one we must have rolled 150 dice, I think.
Because I think between 50 and 60 is what you would expect in a normal game.
Yeah. As I was just about to say, yeah, with a lot of the armies I've used, I try not to roll any charge or melee combat dice to try and shoot people down. But they're still dice rolls, so I suppose they count. Yeah, so that's a lot of dice rolling. If you fight 30 combats over 3 or 4 rounds, if it's over 4, you've got 5 whole phases of rolling dice, haven't you? So that's 150 dice. Each.
We were rolling over 1 dice roll a minute, I reckon. That's going some.
That is quite astonishing. Anyway, to carry on this mediocre sorry, Ray.
I was going to say that would be appalling with Hammy because he has to photograph every dice roll.
I think if he tried that on that scale, somebody might just take his camera phone off him, possibly with extreme prejudice, or just punch him in the face. But yes, that would be, yeah. Anyway, I think we ought to take Matt up on his "you ain't seen nothing yet" comment. And how many attempts to get this army vaguely right?
Well, four would have fixed it. I stopped at 3. There's a minor error that makes it illegal, but it's a very it's one we can live with.
It's a 30-point. It would lower your spend by 30 points, wouldn't it?
Yes, to get it back to legal. So
anyway, Matt, give us the gory details, because this one is definitely falls into the hold my beer category.
Yeah, right. Swabian League. Now, if anybody's looked at the Swabian League list, you can't have anything other than mediocre and competent generals. It literally does not allow you in the list to go any better. This is primarily based on the fact that it had a 100% failure record. It never won anything. So the challenge was set. So mediocre professional army commander, a competent professional army sub-general, and 2 mediocre professional sub-generals. So for a massive 9 cards, it gave me a PBS of 6 because he's a professional still. Rubbish general, but he is professional. He can at least read a map. So that gives me PBS of 6. By dint of taking all the light troops and any cavalry that could possibly give me a scouting marker, I got it to a scouting of 3. Now, if anybody, as Ray has already alluded to, if you have scouting of 5 and you're up against a 2 or a 3, you're going to lose scouting. It is a known fact. It just works out that way. Anyway, so we had 6 and 3. The train standard, forest, and mountain, which is slightly ironic once I read out the list of why that would be an issue. The camp is actually averaged fortified camp because I couldn't find anything else I wanted to spend the points on. There were troops in there so bad that I didn't want them on the table. I would rather have an average fortified camp than have those troops on the table.
They were so bad that even you didn't want to field them.
Correct. Yes, even I wouldn't put them on the table. But anyway, so
if they were allowed barricades, would you have had them?
Yes, probably. Yeah. That's just the way I slowly move across the battlefield. So anybody who's familiar with the Swabian list will know it has this rather interesting set of what I loosely call the knights, which is basically very deep columns of very inept knights.
Sorry, did you say what the generals were? Did I miss that?
Yeah, mediocre, competent, and 2 mediocre sub-generals, all professionals.
9 cards.
9 cards, yeah, for an 11 tug army plus 4 skirmishers. So yeah, that could be interesting to use. and along with half of it being impetuous. But let's not worry about that. So the list allows you to take deep columns of pretty poor knights, which is a front rank, which is tribal close, armored horse, fully armored, charging lancer, dev charger, shove, dismantable, tribal close if I hadn't mentioned it already. So that's the front two, and then they have a back four column, which are tribal close, average protected, dev charger, shove, dismantables. You're with me so far? So that's a very thin veneer of very fully armored knights at the front, and dross for 2 ranks at the back. And I've got 4 units of those.
And they maneuver like.
Yeah, at least they're already in a column, so wheeling is, gets me the best bonus in the world as far as I'm concerned with those. I mean, to be fair, the unit is 600 points for 6 knights, basically, that aren't very good at what they do. 1 unit has the front rank upgraded to superior. They're the guys that actually, found Grandad's armor and it works. So there, yeah. So 4 units of those knights. You've then got mounted handgunners, which I'm actually thinking, along with the next unit, are probably the most useful units in the army. And they are drilled loose, average, fully armored cavalry, obviously, charge only firearm. 6 of them. So that's it. That's all they got. Charge only firearm. So if they're within
I'm not
2,
sure they're any better.
Yeah, the only advantage
can maneuver.
Yeah, exactly. Then you have mounted crossbowmen, which are cavalry, formed loose, average protected, experienced crossbow, melee expert. So they're the.
I like that.
Yeah, I've always had a soft spot for those. And the one really useful unit in the army is Italian men at arms, cavalry, drilled close, armored horse, fully armored, charging lancer, dev charger, melee expert, dismountable. 6 of those. So it's a completely full fat unit of knights. They're the ones that ride past all the others and go, this is what it should be done. Being an Italian, they probably get bribed to go away for the period. I'm not saying anything about Italians in general, just for the period. And then we have 2 militia pikemen. As the name suggests, they're almost as bad as the mounted knights. In fact, if I could have put them on horses, I'd have probably made them better. Formed close, poor, protected pike. 2 blocks of 8. Honestly, if I can find a wood or a forest, that's where I'll be sitting. And then 2 blocks of militia crossbowmen. Again, actually not bad units compared to the rest. Infantry formed loose, average protected, experienced crossbow, protected, combat shy, 2 blocks of 8. So, they'll hang around for a bit before they throw their hands in the air and walk off. And then we've got 4 blocks of skirmishers, all in 6s. One's full archers, one's crossbowmen, and 2 skirmishing handgunners. They'd probably be in the wood with the pike, protecting the pike, quite frankly, like forming a ring around it or something. Anyway, there you have it. It's because I have no control over whether I'm attacking or defending because I'm a mediocre. If I end up defending, they can smear the table in absolute rubbish. And considering most of the army is mounted, the one redeeming feature, possibly, maybe, is all the knights dismount. If they're fully armored, they dismount as fully armored 2-handed cut and crush. The back ranks to all the tribal knights dismount as protected 2-handed cut and crush of the same grades of average. So, you've actually got a lot of 2-handed cut and crush if you want to get off your horses. But with the command cards you've got, you're never getting them across the table. So you're knackered either way. Anyway, there you go. I think if you win one game with it, you've actually done better than the historical reality, so you can claim a moral victory and just walk off with the trumpets flying and blaring.
One question.
Yes, mate.
I have a question. Which tournament are you taking that to in 2025?
Don't tempt me. I am seriously. I did go and look up the STL files I'd need.
And is it on the painting table yet?
Not quite.
I noticed that the knights, when they dismount, become formed.
Yes. Yeah.
So
I saw that.
They move better. I'm afraid I think your handgunners should be protected.
Well, that'll be the 30 points I save for having too many of the other ones.
There you go. It'd probably work out, but yeah.
Yes, so you're quite.
Yeah. Okay. Again, once again, apart from that, I get the impression Ray wants to fight it.
Oh, I'd never say that again about Matt because he can always pull stuff out the fire. But yeah, I do.
Yeah, I'm struggling to find redeeming features with this one, Matt.
I'd be shocked if you found any redeeming feature with this. Quite frankly, it's
Well, I suppose one redeeming feature, you didn't have 4 mediocre generals.
I was tempted, but even I can. The only reason I went with 3 is I thought, God, I might actually need to move 3 of those tribal knights in a block. Because if I start doing it with mediocre and being tribal, that's a lot of yellows and reds I'd need. At least I might get 3 of them off the table, up the table. But anyway.
I like most about it is it's historical. There you go.
Yes, it's one redeeming feature. Yeah, but
It is. It's Richard. This is what your points change has created.
Guilty as charged.
I don't detect any regrets here.
No, I mean it provides more options, which I think is a good thing.
Agreed. Yeah.
Oh yes,
totally.
I mean it was noticeable. I think it was Graham Wilmot a couple of months ago basically asked, does anybody use mediocre army commanders? And the general was no. I think the only ones I can remember of in living memory was at some point Stephen Stead used late Republican Roman with a mediocre commander. And again, that was partly on the view the terrain doesn't matter for that army and everything is pretty damn tough. So what I don't need it. I can save a few points by that and spend them on the subbies. So it's the fact people weren't even considering it. I think was highly reflective that the points were way too high. It's
well, we'll see what the change, whether it encourages anybody to.
I have to say, I am currently building a mid-Republican Roman army in 3D printed miniatures. It might be said, and I am now very seriously considering it with a mediocre general, a mediocre army commander.
Just copying someone else.
Yeah, well, no, this is mid-Republican.
Oh, okay.
Totally different.
It's a slightly odd one anyway, and also, again, this book comes off a 3D printing possibility. If you remember, Matt mentioned there's a Kickstarter running for Sumerians. I've always fancied an Akkadian army. I've got a list for that with a mediocre general as well. Now, both of those could have mediocre instinctive or professional, so you do have some options there. Yeah, as Matt's list shows, mediocre professional can still have a vaguely reasonable PBS. But the fact with mediocre instinctive, I've got an Akkadian list with 15 tugs and 5 sugs. So that just is a huge pillar of death. And also the fact Hammy thinks it's a rubbish army just seems to think a good reason to bring it anyway.
That's the aim.
It's got battle cards, proto chariots, lots of men in sheepskins with long pointy sticks. Yeah, what's not to like?
And Larsa.
It's in Larsa's the sensible version, and Matt and I have already talked about how we can use some of the figures from the Kickstarter with a shield that came in a Hittite STL.
Yeah.
To make reasonably good Isin Larsa figures.
Yeah. Is it too early for me to have my Christmas wish list yet?
Oh, go on, since you've mentioned it, and then I'll do the actual list I'm going to talk about with the mediocre.
So Richard, I have a list request for 2025.
Okay.
My Frisians should have a special rule in the list.
Here we
They
go.
obstacles because they can jump over the dikes with their spears, but then in impact they don't get a factor for the long spear.
Okay.
So
if you're looking for flavour in the lists,
yeah.
So to be clear, what you're saying is if the opponent has obstacles, you can choose to negate them with your long spear and not count the obstacle negative or your long spear plus. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, go for that. That sounds pretty good.
Yeah, because that's what he's saying. I would suggest it might have to be like ditches, obstacles. Yeah.
Yeah, okay, yeah, okay. Yeah, ditches.
I think
Yeah,
most obstacles are that sort of thing, though, aren't they, rather than barricades? So
Yeah. Not barricades, but I think they should be able to jump over ditches and land on top of the people behind them, but their spear is otherwise engaged. By the way, it's an actual, real, sensible suggestion.
It's genius.
it's a real suggestion.
Yeah.
The problem is, as daft as it sounds, it has historical basis.
Yeah. Richard's embarrassed speech after that.
Absolutely.
It is, yes. Well, while Richard's cogitating that, I've got a mediocre instinctive commander army. It's always wondering what sort of really unlikely army to have a mediocre instinctive general, and it's an entirely mounted horse archer army. Which I'm not sure is what jumps out. So there is another reason I went for this one as well. This is Khazar, is because I think it's a change this year. It can now have a medieval Alan ally after I provided Richard with some information. So therefore, it can have an ally that is entirely skirmisher cavalry, which I think is quite funny. Richard's now looking at what horror have I unleashed upon the world. I think, by the way, medieval Alan is an army that doesn't actually have to take any tugs. On the other hand, I don't think it can get above about 6,500 points, even with like a legendary general, if you do it that way. Anyway, this one's got a mediocre instinctive CNC, a talented instinctive for the Alan ally, another talented instinctive, and a competent instinctive. So it's gone for you go for the maximum. So it's maximum command possible. Because it's entirely mounted and made up of loose and flexible and skirmisher cavalry, it comes out with a PBS of 5 and a scouting of 6. So okay, it's and I've always said I'm not entirely that worried about terrain with horse archer armies a lot of the time, but this might PBS of 5. And you're going to lose the initial dice off. Could be a combination that's pushing that theory a little far. It's scouting 6.
6 cards.
6 cards scouting. 5 cards PBS, 6 scouting.
How many cards do you have during the game?
13.
Oh, okay. All right. It's not terrible.
Yeah. It's also got a poor fortified camp. So it's got a couple of units of loose lancer cavalry, unskilled bow charging lancer. Both superior. One's got melee expert. 3 units of form flexible horse archers. 2 6s and a 4. Experienced bow, short spear. The 4 is actually poor, unprotected. That's filling up points. A unit of drilled loose, average protected long spear cavalry, 6. And 2 6s of vulgar bulgars, formed loose, average protected, experienced bow, melee expert, shoot and charge. So that's 8 tugs. So there you are. That's always an interesting one as well. And then I said the ally is 4 6s of skirmishing cavalry, all average unprotected, all combat shy, all with bow. 2 of them are experienced, 2 of them are skilled.
I think this is an army you're going to be using.
If you really want it to have 9 tugs, you could do it. You could either have the bulgars in 4s, or you could play around with stuff, or the flexible horse archers in 4s. But I because it's got a fortified camp, I think I'd probably leave it as 8. Or you could drop the junk 4 base horse archer unit and try and find something else. But I think I put that in because there wasn't anything else. You'd end up doing what Matt did in his army and upgrading the fortified camp. Yeah. So there you are. That's just if you can live with the possible terrain implications, it's possibly not that bad, actually.
Tell you what, it's better than.
Was that better than mine? Yeah. That's not difficult.
Yeah. Richards might just push it off the table.
I was going to say, I'll stick with mine if I may. Well, I might eventually push you off the table. It might take about 5 hours,
if it gets slowed at all, you've not got many cards. One amusing thing this one can do, it could flank march the ally for skirmisher cavalry, because they've got a talented ally. One red to command.
Pretty good chance of coming on, I'd say.
Oh yeah.
As a slight digression on that, it's not relevant to the list discussion, but for the first time, I don't know how long I've been playing MeG, but for the first time, I realised that you can flank march skirmishing infantry with flexible cavalry and they still come on a single red. For some reason, I have never noticed that skirmishing infantry count for that purpose.
Oh, do they? I didn't know that.
Yeah. It just took me completely out of blue. I think it may have been Roger or somebody did, or Aid maybe, had done it to somebody in a game, and they flank marched all their skirmishing infantry, and it appeared in the wood in their flank on the first turn because he threw a red. He pulled a red card. So there you go. Learn something new. And as to your list, it's genius. I love it. I think I've already seen this one before. I'm all for that one. I think it's brilliant. It appeals to me mightily. So that's a kiss of death for it.
It's definitely one of those. I've got to give it a go somewhere sometime. I'm not sure how brave I am for a competition though. But the fact it's still got 13 cards and 6 scouting.
Yeah.
Khazar, not necessarily the greatest horse archer army in the world, but the Caucasian ally does improve it. Because that's new. It picks up the 2 skilled skirmisher units, which help. And I think the Volga Bulgars formed loose, average, protect, experienced, bow, melee, expert, shoot, and shard are deceptively good.
Yes, I'd agree with that.
I think the fact that they don't have a melee weapon for the charge phase, I think some people might underestimate them. But they're average, protected, melee, expert. So, yeah. Anyway,
just quickly to make sure, I'm going to ask for a sanity check on how I read the rule, because the rule is if it's all flexible cavalry, flexible camelry, or sugs, it can come on the table after just 1 red card.
Yeah.
Now I've read sugs as meaning cavalry and infantry. You can't flank march artillery, so
presumably it would say cavalry sugs if it.
Yes, I just wanted to make sure I wasn't being overly non-specific. Cool. There we go.
I can live with that. Interesting thought, and well done if it was Aid or whoever it was who did that.
Yes,
I think that's definitely one of those that people don't know. Right. Anyway, there we are. Look, for listeners, we'll put these lists up on the blog as ever for them to have a look at. I might put the other couple of ones I've just mentioned along the way up there as well, just because I've teased people with them, and if they're up, whatever. So I'd suggest we've got a mixture there between ones where you go, I really don't think that's terribly effective, and maybe some hints that ones could be usable. And there is the old, as I said, the one Stephen Stead certainly used that had the late Republican Roman with a mediocre. I think that is actually a perfectly viable army.
But I think I'm going to have to say Happy Christmas to everyone now.
Okay, Ray, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on.
The tech is letting me down. So Happy Christmas, everyone. Happy Christmas, listeners. See you in the new year.
See you in the new year, Ray. Thank you for joining in. Thank you for your comments. It's been great.
My pleasure.
Cheers, Ray.
I don't think we're going to be here much longer. I think we've reached sort of the end of this podcast, which hopefully has been interesting. Another one that I sound vaguely surprised, I think, when I say I really enjoyed it. So it was one of those, I wasn't sure how it was going to go, folks, but hopefully you out there, the listeners, have also enjoyed it, and there's been some bits in there for you to think about, even if it's only that bit right at the end, where if your flank march is entirely sugs, which includes infantry, it could be entirely infantry sugs, it comes on a single red. So astonishing what you learn, isn't it? Even after all these years of playing the game.
Well, that's it. Yeah, exactly. That's what surprised me. So, yeah.
So
I've got to find a reason to do it now, of course. It's there. It's taunting me.
Well, Well, both that Acadian I just mentioned and the Mid-Republic and Roman, because of the way it's set up, have quite a lot of skirmishers in them. No, don't do it, don't do it. But no, it's another option, I think, or you could include skirmishers with those other troops. You know,
Yeah,
skirmish
certainly
infantry with, say, flexible cavalry.
Yeah.
I think that is an interesting thought, because it allows, it maybe allow you to push something through a piece of rough going that's a snipe at people or something. Anyway, yeah, it's an interesting thought. Thank you for mentioning it. Anyway, I think to wrap up, as we always do, it sort of loops back to where we start. Just a reminder to people out there about the first couple of competitions in I nearly said 1925 again. Well, 1920. Yeah, we're going to end up in the Great Depression at this rate, aren't I? Anyway, 2025. As I mentioned, Ice and Fire is the first UK competition, and that is running. And I forgot to write down the dates. Is it the weekend of the 11th? 11th and 12th of January. That uses the 2024 lists, because just giving you a week or so to knock up an army with the 2025 lists, even with the relatively small number of changes, was not deemed a good idea. So that's the first competition in the UK. And then on the 25th and 26th, there's the Brussels IWC in, obviously, Brussels. So those are the first two up for next year. Then there are ones in February as well, the first one of which is going to be Beachhead, isn't it? 8th, 9th of February, Beachhead in Bournemouth. Obviously, all the details for those are on the forum, so go and have a look there if you are interested. Any other business from Richard or Matt?
Just to wish everybody Merry Christmas and Happy New Year.
Mine's the same, and happy 3D printing.
May Santa bring you a lot of STL files.
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah, I'll join in and say, look, thank you to everybody I've gamed with over this year. It's been a blast, and hopefully see a lot of you in the new year and throughout the year over the gaming tables. Have a great Christmas and New Year. I'm going to say don't eat and drink too much, but
yeah,
go on. It's what the holiday's for. and as well as the STL files, maybe you'll get some other wargaming stuff as well. Anyway, see you all next year, folks.